right, welcome
Okay.
back, fellow jazz bums. Today, we are super excited to have Devin Brahja Waldman here. We are going to get into it. Before we do, please remember to like and subscribe and share this interview as well. We also have the Jazz Bums Discord, so if you want to come and hang out with us there, we'll drop an invite link in the description below. And then we live stream every Friday, so you can come and hang out with us there as well. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Felipe to get us started.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chris. Today in the show, we have Devin Brahja Waldman. He's a New York saxophonist, drummer, synthesizer player, composer, producer, and who leads the group Brahja, among others. Waldman has started his career very early, even in music and literature with his aunt, poet Annie Waldman. He's a co-founding member of Radical Reversal, Diva of Diva Loca, Notable Deaths, performed with many people from Patti Smith to Thurston Moore to Luke Stewart, Godspeed the Black Emperor. And he's involved in a multitude of projects involving not only music, but also literature. His recent records, mostly released on RR Gems, are really sought after, really great reviewed records. And today, this year, we have a new one, put it earlier, called EEG Coherence by his own band. And we also see the reissue of his really sought after and adored debut record from 2019, simply called Brahja. Today, to talk about a little bit of his life, his projects, and what's going on now, we happily have here on the channel today. Welcome, Devin. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing some of your knowledge and passion for music. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me on so much. Yeah.
Awesome. So first question is kind of around like what your musical experience was like as a kid, like what were you listening to? What kind of music did your family listen to?
Sure. Well, yeah, my parents had a really good record collection. A lot of jazz from the 60s, the 50s, a lot of rock and roll as well. My mom loves, some of her favorite composers are Charles Mingus and Gil Evans, Stravinsky. She likes big orchestral sounding music, you know. So so I grew up, hearing a lot of that, but we had a lot of records, Yusuf Lateef records, Monk, those just so many good records that I grew up listening to, and yeah, my aunt you mentioned is a poet, Anne Waldman. She first invited me to perform with her when I was 10. I just happened to have my saxophone with me, attending one of her readings, and she said, "Oh, you have it with you, why don't you play the show with me?" And so I had a inclusive family in that sense, and yeah, my we had a drum set. My dad, plays rock and roll and stuff, so he would often invite me to play drums with his friends and stuff, and so I'm very fortunate to have a family that was inclusive in that way, and I started with a toy saxophone, probably like this big, just plastic thing where I wish I still had it because I've never seen anything like it since, where it was almost sounded more like a harmonica or something, but it was really, you blew into it, but then you pressed a button, and then it was just a kind of interesting toy. So I used to kind of compose with it, and I don't remember any of those songs anymore, but that's how I first started getting my own kind of musical ideas out. And then when I was 8, I changed to the metal saxophone, the actual saxophone, yeah. And still play drums to this day. as well. But that's how I got my start.
When you got that first metal saxophone, was it like an alto sax? Or
Yeah, I've yeah, I was an alto. Still to this day, I only have an alto. I love playing the other ones, but I've only borrowed them at times from friends and stuff.
okay. Well, that sounds like your parents had a great jazz collection. Was there any artist in particular that stood out to you at a young age, or did you gravitate to jazz at a young age, or were you
Very
just kind
much
of listening
so.
to? You did? Okay.
Yeah, very much so. Like I mean, Coltrane was
Hmm.
a huge. His music blew me away. It still does. I was studying with this guitarist who had really good taste in music, and he was a abstract painter, or still is, named Richard Saba, and he was really into Albert Ayler and Coltrane and Monk and Ornette Coleman and Wayne Shorter, and you just go down the list of all the greats of that era. So he used to let me borrow his vinyl as well, and I had the like my parents had this um, a machine that would could you could record it onto tape.
Oh,
So I
cool.
used to make mixtapes from his collection as well. So all those I named really stood out to me, and then I started getting into Alice Coltrane and Sun Ra, and I mean, there's
Hmm.
just so many people to name. Oliver Nelson, Eric Dolphy, Paul Bley. Paul Bley was a big influence on me as well, and he was actually a neighbor of ours, so I got to spend
Oh,
time with
wow.
him as a
Oh, that's
kid. Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
So you came from a very rich environment, just from this early age. Just one thing, were you like self-taught? What you had any formal education on the instrument? And you were like at 10 already playing. How did you make this? Okay, I'm gonna be a professional musician now. And yeah, how did you got yourself
Sure.
together for that?
I'm not entirely self-taught because I had a lot of mentors around me, but of course, you have to be autodidactic as well to put that study in and practice but like I mentioned, I was studying with a guitar player, and he would write everything. He would write. We would go through this. The real book, right, and look at standards and stuff. So he would write them out in concert, and then I started learning how to transpose it to E flat, which is what the alto saxophone is in from concert, and learn how to improvise through the chord changes. So that was one thing. But I also was in studied the saxophone at school, so I was learning at school how to read music, or what where a B is, where a D is, where all the basic stuff like that. Um, and then later I started studying with this guy named Al Galladoro, who's at the time was in his late 80s, and he had played in jazz orchestras in the 1920s, and
Oh, wow.
like he was, yeah, a very very special guy. So he taught me a bit more about about saxophone technique and things like that, because I wasn't much of a sight reader. I could transpose from concert, but I'm still not actually, like, it's never excelled fully at sight reading and stuff because I just didn't put the time in. But he kind of helped me along with that, or certain other technical things when it comes to embouchure, or I don't know, just you know the technique of it, and where he thought I needed some attention, and then I went to university, studied at a conservatory in Montreal, at the music conservatory at McGill, and studied formally there. Studied, various aspects of music. I was in the performance department, but we studied theory, we studied all kinds of things. But ultimately, it's those hours when you're alone or with other bandmates and putting all that time in that really gets it into the body. So
Yeah, and you found yourself as a composer from early on as well.
well, like I said, even when I had that toy, I started
Mm-hmm.
um, playing. I'd say, oh, this sounds good, and I remember it, and then when I would go back, I'd play it again, and so I always had I was always drawn to that. And when I would listen to Yusuf Lateef albums, or listen to um, other albums, Roland Kirk is another saxophonist that I listen a lot to. It would just naturally, I would have ideas that would come, and so I learned to write them down so I could remember them or record them onto some device or another, and then I started dreaming of having a band, and then finally that came together when I went to Montreal, because I met the right people and formed kind of the earlier iterations of the Brahja group, and so I met Daniel Gelina, who's a drummer on a lot of those records, met Damon Hancock, the pianist on some of those earlier records, and Martin Heslop on bass, and met a whole Adam Kinner, and Adam Kinner and I, we used to meet every day and do ear training together and stuff. So when I started meeting the right people, it inspired me even more to compose, because I knew I have the makings of a band that could play this music. So
Yeah.
so then
I wanted
and I always tend to compose on piano. So I never had really any formal training on piano, but I just learned how to do it just by repetition, just getting an idea out and say, okay, I want the left hand to do this, and then you gotta get your hands to be able to do that idea, and then the ideas, you can start putting together more and more advanced ideas, because now you're able to do more rudimentary things. So I learned how to play piano just by composing, really.
when you started to put a band together, you mentioned, ideas and how you wanted to kind of approach the music. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of like where your compositions, where you wanted them to be in terms of how they sound, and then how you connected with those musicians and what their influence was, and like how you arrived at kind of the beginnings of your group in terms of where you were sound wise.
I started even when I was like, I don't know, 12, or I started. I had this notebook. And I started writing down songs, and I made some of the records I've made. I revisited my earliest compositions from when I was that age. So I think that aesthetic quality really came from something, the inspiration from, listening to all the music I listened to, including, Velvet Underground records and all the rock and roll I was listening to as well. Jimi Hendrix totally blew me away. I mean, I remember I was really into hip hop as well when I was a kid, and I was, for a while, I just wanted hip hop CDs and whatnot. And then my dad was once with me at a store, and he's like, "Oh, you should really check out Jimi Hendrix." And I said, "No, I want this hip hop record." And he's like, "Well, I'll get the CD, Jimi Hendrix CD, for your sister." And then we played it when we got home, and immediately I asked my sister if she would trade trade one of my hip hop CDs, and she was down. So I was like, "Oh my god!" Like
That's awesome.
Jimi Hendrix totally blew me away. Herbie Hancock. When I first heard Headhunters, I was just astonished that
Yeah.
these sounds existed, that this is possible, and that that you belong to a species that is able to generate such sound. Is very. So I think that's really where something, also a mysterious source that I mean, I don't know really the ultimate source of the soul, and are we reincarnated, and what's past lives, all this kind of where it comes from. But as far as like what inspired the aesthetics, like certainly all the music I had been listening to, and I could go on about certain rock and roll influences, and then getting into bar talk and all of that. Like it's just listening so much to so much music, more than I do now, because now I'm always working on music. But for a while, I just every night I would fall asleep to like In a Silent Way by Miles Davis. I mean, and that record is so unbelievable. Miles Smiles. I was always looking in record stores to find an actual Miles Smiles LP. So, but I would never. Some people, when you're a jazz musician, they think, "Oh, you're only into jazz. You're like you look down on other music, or is it because jazz is more complex or whatever harmonically?" But I was never that way. I loved all kinds of music, and even when I was really young, sometimes people ask me my name, and I would say I'd even say my name was Michael, or I'd say my name is George, even though it wasn't, because I loved Michael Jackson and George Harrison. So my mom would have to correct me, like that's not his actual name, but he loves George Harrison, and
That's awesome.
So I mean Michael Jackson, just those the dance moves and everything. Like I just was drawn in by all of that. My sister really, she loved like Nirvana and Cyndi Lauper, and all kinds of stuff was always being played around the house and stuff. And I to this day I love Nirvana. I think they're just one of the greatest bands to have done it. So just no end to what we could talk about. Then I met meeting people. They introduced me to music I'd never heard. From Egypt, from the Balkans, wherever. Just keep expanding the palette or whatever. But all of that inspired the aesthetic, I guess. And meeting people, you also who you form a band with, and you also start thinking, well, what can we, there's certain opportunities and limitations put on it. Like, okay, there's a bass player, a pianist, a drummer who are willing to form a band. So what can the pianist do, and what can the bassist do to make it as full as possible? And what do we have to work with? And then, trial and error and everything.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. From the albums that I've heard, I love the aesthetic. I definitely see that there's a huge jazz influence, but I feel like there's definitely influences from rock and roll. It's got, there's a lot of like interesting things that you guys are doing. I really enjoy your studio albums that you've done.
Yeah. I'm just gonna say,
Appreciate that.
yeah, a few years ago I came across your first record, right? And it was such a great surprise. And exactly, you look at the whole aesthetic, the whole approach, and it's not on the US label. It's like, where the heck is this coming from, right? There's so much going on. But at the same time, it feels very coherent. It feels very, it's not like a hodgepodge of ideas. There's like
Right.
a structure, there's a backbone to it. So that I would
Yes.
like to, speaking of coherence, talk about your latest record that came out earlier this year on our Gems,
Oh, I love that cover.
Yeah,
which, yeah, it's a great
Thank
idea.
you.
I mean, yeah. Again, it comes from our Gems. Uh, by the way, thank you, Dimitri, for helping a lot with making things happen. But there's so many ideas, and this is a heavy on guitars record. How did this record come by? Because I found it's a departure from your second one, very different from the voices and Middle Eastern influences. And is this heavy? Is this intense? I really liked it. So what was like the method there? How did this music come together?
Well, yeah, that gets back to meeting the musicians on that record. Sam Shalabi on guitar, Liam O'Neill on drums, Morgan Moore on bass, Janice Lowe on voice and flute, and Ala Dagan on voice. Yeah, so that, yeah, like, I guess, well, I met Sam, I guess, playing some gigs in Montreal. He lives there, and and we hit it off musically right away. He's also on the 2019 Brusha record as well. But yeah, we and then Morgan, Liam, Sam, and I had a gig at Resonance in Montreal, which is, Martin Heslop, the bass player on some of the other records. He opened this venue called Resonance in Montreal. It's closed now, but we had a gig there, and actually Jonah Fortune, he's the bass player on Land of Kush, Sam's album. He was going to do it, but then he had to cancel. So then I had heard Morgan Moore play a number of times, and he's an amazing bass player. So I asked him if he could do it, and there was just a real, very strong chemistry between us, all four of us. And then we thought, we gotta, I think the first couple shows we did, we were playing Ornette tunes, maybe Monk tunes, Wayne Shorter tunes, Sam Rivers tunes.
That's awesome.
And then we thought we should compose some music for this group. So both Sam and I wrote some songs, and then then we started playing those. And then obviously we thought, wait, well, let's record this. So we went into Hotel Tatango, that studio in Montreal that members of Godspeed You Black Emperor, they open that studio, they run that studio along with some other folks. But so Thierry Amar, one of the bass players in Godspeed, recorded the album. Then over the course of mixing it, I reached out to Janice and Ala to see if they want to overdub on it, and that's how that came together. And then there's an envisioning process of what songs to use and which ones to leave out, and the order and the titles, and how to make it kind of into a more of a concept album, which it is. Can
you talk about the concept of that record?
Well, yeah. So it starts with a song called Jitters. Um, Jitters, and sometimes I put the a parentheses in antidote in the title. And then the second song is Apology. The third song is No, parentheses, apophysis. And then the fourth song is Medicine Woman Meets Father Sky. And then the fifth song is Care. And it sort of tells an allegory of, you start with the jitter or fear, whether, and I write all this out in the liner notes, but the fear of it, various sources where that fear could be coming from. And then, but it gets into like self-loathing and all kinds of societal baggage that people inherit and stuff. And then you face your own culpability, like the things that you've done that you regret, or that things that you've supported that were not right. And then you utter the cosmic apology, also the apology to others when necessary, but also to creation itself. Like we are, obviously human civilization is so unequal, unjust, really backwards in so many ways. And we've really alienated from basic moral principles of love and respect, and not only for each other, but the earth itself. And part of the what inspired the titles, although some of them were already set, but then the way it all put together, I ate some psilocybin mushrooms and sat by a stream and was just bawling, because, and like screaming and just like, sweating and snot coming out, and just like, and I really, there was like such a purging going on. And I actually was with Ala Dagan at the time, who's on the record, but it was, and just saying, kind of like saying sorry to the earth, like sorry, like this human reality is so twisted, and the way the earth is poisoned, you get into chemical farming and shit that's sprayed all over the soil, and the oil that's dredged up and blasted everywhere and seeps into the rivers, and all this kind of just toxicity, but also philosophical toxicity. It's like we really need to apologize to ourselves and to nature, which we are nature, right? So and Apollo means light, so it's like the light comes in as you're willing to admit you're wrong, which is so like, this is basically the dynamic that holds up the evolution of our species. So many people just refuse to admit they're wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And
exactly.
like, and we get programmed with various things from a young age, and then we become like people like really adopt those belief systems, and then it's very hard to come out of that. Or, as Mark Twain said, it's easier to fool people than convince someone they've been fooled. So then it's, it's dealing with that theme. And then the next song is No, or apophysis. And apophysis, it means, to define something apophatically is to define it by saying what it's not, right? So you're saying freedom is not some people dominating over others, right? Or a human right is not initiating harm to others, right? So because you would say, well, what's a human right? And you could say, well, you have the right to have to lie down in the snow. You have the right to take a walk. You have the right to look at the sky. You have the right to drink a glass of water. You could go on and on and on about all the things you have the right to do. But it's very simple and concise to define what is a human right by saying what a human right is not, right? A human right is an action that doesn't initiate harm to other to others, right? And then it's very concise. And as long as you're not doing that, then you're within your rights. So that's what you have to learn what you have to say no to, and that's that's apophysis. So that song deals with that. And then Medicine Woman Meets Father Sky is the union of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, and healing that divide, not only externally, because obviously there's a lot of healing necessary between men and women and all of that, but it's also an internal process, because we all, regardless of our external expression of gender, we all have the sacred feminine, sacred masculine within ourselves, and so it's that union, or people have called it the alchemical wedding. So it's the union of those energies within ourselves, and synchronizing left brain and right brain, and so that we can hook up with the heart. Because right now, obviously, the mind and heart, I'm not talking about all individuals, but as an aggregate collective of humanity, it's not synchronized. The mind and heart is not synchronized. A lot of people are very left brain imbalanced, very all into intellect and so-called logic. But if you're not hooked up with the heart, then it ceases to be logical, right? Truly, it's not. So we need all of our components. We have intuition, logic, creativity, imagination. Like, we have all these spiritual components that comprise us. I mean, the human apparatus is totally, unbelievably miraculous when you think about all the kinds of intelligences that we're comprised of. But if they're not synchronized, we become very imbalanced. So that's what the EEG coherence is about, because the EEG is the electroencephalogram. It's a test, a scientific test to see how if you have hemispheric balance between the right and left brain. Because if you look at like people who've been dominators, they're very left brain imbalanced. They have a lack of intuition and compassion and care and imagination, creativity. But you can also be right brain imbalanced, which leads to a submissiveness complex where you're just think with your emotions. Mm-hmm. So you gotta use it all. Your emotions, your thoughts. You have to the thoughts have to verify the emotion, or vet them. Like, I'm feeling this right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right or true. So I have to it's true that I'm feeling this way, and that's valid. But just because I want something to be true doesn't make it true, right? Like, so that's what that is all dealing with. And then the last song is Care. And also the Medicine Woman Meets Father Sky is dealing with the allegory of like the Mother Earth and Father Sky. The kind of people have often talked about the sunlight, like inseminating the earth, like the seed that kind of hooks up with the egg and creates the blossoming of life or whatever. So it's dealing with the allegory of those energies meeting in a coherent and peaceful way. And then Care, but again, that's it's external, but it's very much about the internal process of becoming coherent, so that care can be born, because that's the ingredient that really makes everything. Well, like, if you don't care about your child, then obviously you'll neglect your child. If you don't care about your plants, then you won't water your plants, and then they die. If you don't care about the food you're cooking, then you're going to burn it. If you don't care about the composition and you put no time into it, then it won't sound as good. It won't be illuminated in the same way. Like, it all comes down to that, like, that attention and focus and care we put into our creations and our responsibilities, and the care for each other people's suffering, and all of this, like, the care energy really is what makes, all of our positive manifestations come into being. And then the lack of care, the negligence and abandonment and all of that creates the chaos that also, like if you don't do your dishes for 7 months, imagine like you just pile up and it's like the rats come in, the cockroaches, just like chaos. Because right. And so it's that that ingredient that is necessary to maintain an order, but not the kind of the law and order that we've been told, but a kind of a natural order of what actually creates order as opposed to chaos is care, So that's what the song titles are dealing with, and yeah.
That's
yeah, that
beautiful.
was great, man.
That
Yeah,
was
I
fucking
really
awesome.
enjoyed that. I
Beautiful.
do. I mean, I think that the idea of an allegory for music makes a lot of sense because it really helps kind of illustrate the narrative. And what you just described is kind of like an epic narrative. Like it starts dark, it goes to light, everything in between, and the sequencing of it all, I feel like really makes a lot of sense. And I do like where you like the last song, like hearing your voiceover and just thinking about the music. The last song I feel like
Mm,
really gets to a place where it feels positive in a way. Like your sax on like the last third of that track, it's really I don't know, it's just like a positive, I don't want to say it's upbeat, but it's
mm.
like there's a
Yeah,
positivity
I would,
there that comes through and it really does take you through from where it starts. Like the first song, it kind of starts with like drums and kind of cacophony and where are you? This is not feel like negative, and then you go through that
right.
journey. And I think that Apology is really good. The Medicine Woman one is like it's like almost healing, like right, like it's just
Yeah,
it's
Yeah.
got like it's got I don't know how to explain it best, but like it's just chill. It's a spiritual, the whole thing's spiritual, but I feel like that really has like that spiritual vibe to it. And
sure.
then I just enjoyed it. So the question I have for you is, when you're in the studio and you're talking with your fellow musicians, are you explaining this to them? Like, are you trying to share this vision beyond just like what's in the chart and like what your vision is? So that's question one. And then the other question is what stuff did you leave off this album? And like, how difficult was it to figure out what you wanted to include it? So there's a
Yeah,
lot there.
well, in
Yeah.
yeah, the and for the first question, um, it wasn't the whole concept wasn't fleshed out yet when we were in the
Okay.
studio, and it's like we didn't have a title for the album or even a band name. We didn't. Some of the songs had titles that we ended up retitling. It wasn't. It was. It was a process of like through mixing the album and reflecting on life and things that the whole concept came to into view. So it wasn't all there and yet, and as far as choosing the songs, um in a way I think there was one of Sam's tunes that I think was, oh no, there was probably two things that sounded good to me, but just maybe needed something else, or maybe we could put it out later in some other way. But ultimately, for me, choosing what made it to the album, what didn't, was mostly a product of just um, how we played that day and or those 2 days that we were recording, and what really we did the most justice to in terms of which takes. And but even that, my perception of that changed a bit over time, because the first song, Jitters, like I I was gonna at first I thought there was a different take that should be on the album, but then over a process of time, I went back and I heard that one. I said, no, actually, I think that one's the one. So there was some close calls, but but I think just sitting with the album and being patient with it and taking the time necessary to really assess what we really were working with, that made it clear to at least me and my sensibilities that those songs were the strongest works we did. I think everyone and part of that session had a hard drive and took the music and but not, I don't know, I guess we all got busy with different things, and then at some point I reached out to them and say, well, I think these are the strongest works, and people say, yeah, go for it, like, go ahead and mix it. But at some point we were all gonna like take part in mixing and editing and stitching things together and all that, but in the end, I think we all got busy with different things, and then I just offered to kind of put in the time to make it happen.
Yeah, just one follow up to that. Like from what I'm hearing, how you developed this is what really is kind of fascinating is like the creative process of this. It doesn't sound like it was necessarily linear. Like you had a concept, you put it down, you got the musicians. It seemed like, and this I think is the case with some of the greatest art ever. It's like you start working on it, and all the
Yeah.
like there's just all these different things that you're networking and dealing with, and then ultimately you get to the final result, and it turns into like a beautiful thing that when you were at kind of point A, just starting on it, um, would probably have seemed daunting at that point to where it finally gets to. And I think that happens in life a lot, like where things aren't just like clearly defined. Like there's all these like
Right.
outside externalities and different ways of thinking, and just like serendipity happens all the time,
Yeah.
where you just take the
Yeah.
opportunity and how you're feeling here. Like you were saying, you had that experience by the river, like how that influenced things. So I just loved hearing
Exactly.
about the creation of this piece, and I think I don't know. It just to me, it just like elevates its meaning even more.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I agree that you you got to follow your inspiration, and it may not all be clear ahead of time, but you embark on the journey of trying to complete a project, and then if you can remain open and not wall yourself off from information, then you can, you know synchronicity and serendipities, as you say, can help point you in the direction, and in order to complete the project and do it justice, make the most of it. Because that I don't I know we have good songs to work with. I know we have good recordings to work with, and yet if you don't put in that care and that time, attention, and all that thought, you might end up with a mix that's not you're not happy with, or so many things can go wrong where you really feel you didn't do it the music the justice that you could have. So it does take a lot of thought and care to make the most of it, and follow the inspiration and the synchronicity to let that inspiration in, and ultimately that way of doing things um, helped me realize eventually that all that material could fit together as a coherent sort of conceptual album.
Yeah, that's interesting. Listening to that record today, and hearing you talk about the whole concept of it, just kind of reminds me of how that doesn't exist in a lot of that just doesn't exist in our society, and it's just everybody's so divided. The social media boils everything down with no nuance, right? And so listening to the music and beyond the conception, the nuance is just amazing. I listened to that record and I listened to the 2019 record this morning, and it just feels like there's so much care that went into the music, and there's a lot going on, right? Like just audibly, and I really enjoyed it. And having said all that, could you talk about like your technical process as you record the music and then you talked about overdubs. You mentioned in a silent way, and it makes me kind of think of Bitches Brew. Do you chop up the takes too, and kind of mix them into what you want to hear, and then yeah, like talk about overdubbing and just kind of that whole creative process in the studio.
Sure, yeah. I definitely there are definitely splices and edits in that record and other records I've done. Some records I've done just um, wanted to approach it like more of a live recording um, in a approach where really what we play is whatever is going to end up on the tape or on the album. However we play it with no edits, but certainly I don't approach every album that way. And also you're working with like 40 maybe 42 3 4 minutes max for a vinyl, so sometimes you do have to cut out something that seems gratuitous or just not quite, yeah, or the energy starts to dip a little, and you got to make an edit that's musical without taking away from the experience, but to help enhance the experience as a listener. And so, and I noticed that with some Charles Mingus records, if you can listen to different versions where there's an edit for the vinyl, and then you listen to a version but there's no edit, or even on like the that Velvet Underground song, her life was saved by rock and roll, rock and roll. Despite all the amputations, you could just listen to the rock and roll station. What's that song called? From yeah,
Chris Felipe. Come
but
on,
anyway,
Felipe.
There's or no, or is it that? Or no, maybe it's another one I'm thinking of where there's two versions with the with the edit and without. So anyway, yeah. So that's definitely, and same with overdubs. Like if there's the chance to enhance it with a saxophone overdub or a vocal overdub, like Janice Lowe came in and recorded, like we were no longer in Hotel to Tango, but just came over to my place in New York, and she overdubbed flute and voice on the song Jitters, and because it would not be the same without those added textures, and those layers really give it. Sometimes the flute, the way I mix it is it's you might even think, well, what is that? Or is that a voice, or is that a flute, or is that the saxophone? But just kind of this color that's in there gives it something that really helps make it a more vivid experience for the listener.
Absolutely.
Because as when I'm mixing, especially, but also when I'm playing, I really put myself in the position of the listener, and really want that to be something I could listen to again and again and again. The way I would listen to certain albums, like I mentioned, in a silent way or something, just certain albums again and again and again and again. I would want to create that kind of experience where you would hear something in it every time you listen to it that would keep you wanting to go back and revisit it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. My internet cut out for a second. I'm sure I froze up or disappeared or whatever. And that comes across, talk about care. I think that's the difference between like a great album and just another okay record that, you listen to and you're like, okay, it's cool. And then you don't really want to go back to it, right? And I feel like listening to those two records this morning, that all the care that you put into it is obvious. Now, do you mix it like on a computer at home, or are you going back into like a studio to mix? Like, how is that? What does that process look like?
Um, yeah, no, in the case of the records we've talked about today, I mix it at home on Pro Tools. Um, I did that with the 2019 Brahja record as well. Like, that's really the first record I mixed and learned how to mix. And then also later, I was also starting to work on Kadef around the same time and learning that record and learning how to mix with those two records, and also EEG Coherence. These are some of the first records where I really did a lot of mixes before I settled on a mix that I thought was right, because there was a lot of trial and error because I was learning how to do it. And so yeah, that's I have, and other times worked with a mixing engineer, and and sitting there and sort of learning the ropes to some extent, or watching the person do it and see how it comes together. And that's been really rewarding as well. But I guess eventually I wanted to have all the time needed to really try to make it just right, and like, because it can, if I'm there have been times where I've, like, I would mention Daniel Jelena. He mixed some early records that we did, and like but sometimes I'd say, well, can we try this? Can we try that? Can we try this? Can we try that? And he just eventually was like, well, like, you should probably learn how to do this stuff so you can experiment with all your ideas. I mean, he was very kind and patient as well, but he also showed me how to, so that you don't always have to rely on someone else to try out all your different ideas, because you try this out and it takes a long time to try something out sometimes, and then you're like, never mind. And sometimes, I just wanted to have all that know-how, so I could take however much time needed to try it all out. And if you like say like a splice, sometimes to get a very precise splice, it can take a really long time. Sometimes it just comes together effortlessly, but other times it's like, it's not quite right. You try a little further, try a little back, not quite right. And then if you take all that time, and then, if also you're paying for someone and stuff, and then afterwards you're like, I don't really think that splice is going to work. It's, you realize in those moments, I guess I got to learn how to make splices myself.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, because like you're like the ultimate decision maker in terms of what the final product is going to be. And like, and I'm sure, I don't know what your process is for mixing, but like, like you probably have come back to things too and just said, that thing that was kind of irritating me, maybe I want to revisit that and like get it even, tighter or something. And having that A/B comparison can help. I don't know. I'm just, I can appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately the concept is in your mind, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It gives you the, it's like trying to paint a painting, and you're asking someone to like, well, can you paint it like this and use this color and actually mix a little more yellow in, and actually, well, erase that, and you do. It's like, it's you have your own arms and legs and your own mind to make that happen yourself, and if so why not learn the whole process,
which is
especially with.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
No, especially with the digital, revolution within music and stuff, and having the ability to have a whole studio within a software program like Pro Tools or something like that, it really does allow you to do it from your own bedroom with headphones, or you get a couple monitors and figure it out. So it's pretty cool, to be a part of that, to be a part of this era when that's possible. Even you could, and it's not to say, oh, it always translates to a better product or something, because I mean, 70s records just sound amazing, right? But yeah, I really enjoy the process of learning how to produce records, mix records, and everything else.
Well, it became part of the creative process for jazz recordings, like with Bitches Brew. I mean, that's totally edited and spliced and mixed up and all that to create a final product. I really find the technology interesting because I think it's like a democratization of that capability, right? Like there's a lady in England named Imogene Thackeray, who's put out some really cool records that she recorded a couple of them during the pandemic. And so like each person that's on that record literally recorded in their bedrooms with a microphone and sent her the files, and she chopped them up and fixed them, and they went back and they collaborated and they produced this really amazing project with never even seeing each other. So can you talk about just the fact that so many people have access to be able to do this now and how important that is?
Yeah, well, I'm releasing this record, Nebulizer, this fall on Cortisona in Belgium, the label in Belgium, and I think probably November we'll have it out. Cool. But but a lot of it was done that way. There was some studio sessions in my friend's studio in the basement, but then a lot of it, like Naima Carlson is on it. She plays vibraphone and bells, and piano on the record, and Kenichi Iwasa, and they live in the UK, so they got together and recorded it. And then there's a choir on it, my friends Annie Shaw and Sarah Good in Hamilton, Ontario. They have this choir called Earth, Wind, and Choir, and they overdubbed separately. And Adam Kinner, again, he plays tenor and soprano saxophone, and he recorded. And then Georgia Wartell Collins, bass player from Sweden originally, who now lives in New York, but she recorded it either in Sweden or Norway, and then sent me those recordings. And there's probably even other examples. Janice Lowe is on it too, but she came over to my place to record it. But yeah, so we did it very much how you're describing, and it works. It works, and there's also something to be said for playing together in a room, of course, and even have, it's cool isolation between mics. So, obviously you're not going to have drums in the bass mic if you're not even recording in the same space or time. But there's also to be something to be said for that bleed in sound, and that and just the energy of the moment being in the same room. And nothing can replace that, but it's just another form that is also a valid form to explore.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of dogma around that too, right? And there always has been. I mean, even back when people started Tristano was the first guy that used tape machine to cut up stuff. And
he likes sped up time and spliced.
Exactly. He started doing that stuff, and people freaked out. Like, what are you doing, man? This is not right. And then the same thing happened when Bitches Brew came out, right? Traditionalists said, you can't do this. This isn't real music. Or this isn't jazz or whatever. So I think that both, like you said, both things are valid, and that they just have different purposes and different outcomes. And I think it's just another representation of a lot of the spiritual stuff you're talking about division and that sort of thing. And it's just a kind of a stupid thing to be divided over, if that makes sense, in a world of stupid divisions.
Yeah, as long as you're not harming anyone, then what's the problem? Like with
Yeah.
exploring different forms, I think people can tend to get hung up on the purity of a form,
Mhm.
but all forms are valid to explore as long as no one's getting enslaved or harmed in the process. Then why not give it a try? And it might fail to your sensibilities, or it might be wildly successful to your sensibilities, but it's all worth exploring and experimenting with. And also, it's just practical too, like how this record, in the case of Nebulizer, I was just talking about, like it just wouldn't have been able to be made otherwise. Like people live in the UK and Scandinavia and Canada and New York and um, other places, and it's just how else how much resources like would it take to get to fly everyone to a place, book a room that had all the mics and everything to be able to record all of us and have proper isolation between the sounds, or if we're all gonna be in the same room with no isolation between mics, what are the chances you're going to have one take where everything comes together the way you'd want it, and you're not stuck with certain things, certain sounds that are bleeding to other mics that you would rather, you know you would rather not be there. So then it's like, okay, we're going to fly everyone to a single room, we're going to book them, we're going to book the studio, and then we're all going to play in such a way that we'll be perfectly happy with the results. I mean, kudos to anyone who has pulled that off,
Mhm.
because that's not easy to do. But in the case of Nebulizer, it's like, people can send a few different takes, and then you can move it around. You say, well, I like what the person did, but I think if I just move the wave file over here, even though they played it there, but it sounds good over here, you have total flexibility to do that. And you're not stuck with one kind of thing that was captured by the mics, but have the room to experiment, and with a bunch of different takes and combine them how you sees fit. And sometimes it might be kind of happy accident. You might just, like in the case of, I'm thinking of something that Georgia played where it was like I just kind of I imported the file and just kind of dragged it from the beginning of the sin to where the song was, but it didn't line up to where how she actually played it. But for the whole opening passage, it sounded good, just how it was off. It's like, well, that's a happy accident that you can't necessarily, even you maybe wouldn't have planned it. But I'm open to all of that. Why make your life harder just because you're stuck to a more puritanical kind of form that it's supposed to be. And maybe you want to try that. Like, can I record live with a bunch of musicians, and can we do a take all in the same room that sounds good and no editing, no nothing? And kind of, you might want to at some point in your life, like, show yourself you're capable of doing that, because maybe all your heroes were able to do that or whatever, and that's valid too.
Mhm.
But you don't have to only do that for the music to be valid or whatever. It's like, there's no, again, I really only think the one rule is, like, don't harm people, and that's the natural law. And it's like everything else is just kind of could easily be turned into a dogma, like you were saying.
So yeah, and just to show Devin and others, this record is being reissued now on our jams. Finally, people have been like waiting for
Yeah.
so long for this to get back in print, and that was my first one. That's the second press. Now the first has like a brownish tone to it, and just going back to this, the studio, the production, and everything. You've been doing such an amazing job with our gems. Their product is like top notch. The quality of the records, the quality of these jackets they use, everything so heavy, so well done, so well printed. How much care do you
Totally.
put into like the post production, the vinyl product? How much do you care about the sonics? How is your involvement in that part, and how do you work with them?
Yeah, well, speaking of care, Dimitri, who runs RGM's label, has a lot of care for all of those things you just mentioned. Like, really wants the listening experience to be um, as good as it can be, in terms of sound quality, in terms of the packaging and the materials he uses, like the and always open to doing liner notes and really going deep into the artwork. I mean, that comes down to the imagination and ability of the artist. Like in that case, I work with Ryok from Japan, and she's just she does woodblock artwork.
Oh,
So
awesome.
that cover you just put up, that's all carved into wood and then printed, but it's she's and you I think on Instagram she's Cage. Oh, I don't know how to spell it exactly, but I'm just trying to give people a way to look into her artworks, because she
We'll
does
we'll drop a link in the
amazingly.
description.
Yeah, she does amazing woodblock artworks. Of all, she's just phenomenal, truly phenomenal. And then for the albums Watermelancholia and Nebulizer, it's working with this artist out of UK, Nisa Nishikawa, who is brilliant artist. Kadef was Ala Dagon, and she drew that kind of just very beautiful. Oh well, that right there that's those are different photographs, and then a layout done by Jason McLean, and that all that inspired the final artwork of Ryok, who then carved all of that based on the artworks and or the photographs and everything.
Yeah,
That's
That's
outstanding.
great.
it's
So she
outstanding. And it's things like thick and
she
heavy.
she
Yeah,
so yeah, major props to all those artists, because yeah, yeah, like and also Dimitri for all the care and attention to put it all together, and and so I'm very, very fortunate to have found people who care as much as I do.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm excited
Um,
about the repress. I don't have the record yet, so I can't wait to get a copy. It's going to be amazing.
well,
it is hard, and people keep asking. It's great that and then Dimitri one day he contact. Oh no, we are repressing this. There's more coming. Tell people to wait because it's gonna be available.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's probably. I think he said shipping starts October 7th, give or
Mhm.
take. But the
Yes.
pre-order is available. But yeah, I'm very grateful to Aura Gems, because they're just, yeah, like Dimitri's just such a pleasure to work with, and
Mhm.
I'm happy that the another pressing is now out there so people can get their hands on it.
And
Yeah.
the roster on that label is incredible.
Oh yeah, yeah. And Dimitri has such great taste, such great aesthetics, and such a deep love for music. And I think I once read, like, he um and Valentine, who I guess he's maybe not part of it anymore, but maybe he is, I don't know, but they were their inspiration. I could have this wrong, but I think their inspiration for the label is just like listening to records together and going deep into the listening experience, and then deciding, like, let's have a label and make this happen. And really, that love and care for the music is so obvious and palpable, in what they do, because they're really coming from that passion of in the same way that, I was talking about, like falling asleep to certain records and just falling in love with music and giving so much meaning to life. Because then you wake up and you're like, I can I got the juice I need to do what I got to do, because like you heard all that music. And now once a friend told me, when you listen to music, you are music, you become music. And I really
like
liked
that.
how we put that.
Yeah.
Me too.
I like that. So we've been going an hour. We could definitely do another hour, but we won't go there. But guys, Chris, Felipe, do you have any final comments, questions?
No questions. Just really appreciate you sharing with us, and yeah, it's been a great conversation. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
Felipe,
appreciate you all. I really enjoy it as well.
Thanks for joining, Devin. It was a pleasure talking to you. I mean, a big fan of your music for quite some time. And when Dimitri said, "No, let's make it happen," I was quite happy they were able to have you on the channel. I hope you have you in the future for the next release.
yeah, that'd be great.
Totally,
Very looking forward to.
All right.
totally,
All right.
yeah, absolutely.
So we'll drop links to all of Devin's social media, Bandcamp, website, so you can find those records. And let us know what you think. Drop a comment. Please share this, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Appreciate it. Thank you.